Welcome, everybody, to the March 4th, 2019 Transportation Commission. We'll get right into the agenda. Item number 1 is approval of the regular meeting minutes for February 4th.
So moved. I move approval.
Second.
John motions and Ron seconds. The meeting minutes are approved. General public comment. I'll read the paragraph here that everybody's heard a lot. Public is allowed to speak to any items or issues that are not scheduled on the regular agenda. Each person or organization will be limited to 3 minutes. As a general practice, the Commission will not discuss, debate these items, nor will the Commission make decisions on items presented at this time. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, state their name and address, and the speakers should address all comments to the Commission. Do we have any public comment?
Good evening, Chair Stephen Evans, excuse me, I call him Stephen, and Commissioners. My name is Michael Allman. Tomorrow at the City Commission, you may know that a development for smart growth mixed use at 23rd and Naismith is on their agenda. And I just wanted to point out that this had come to the Planning Commission, but even though it has several layers of transportation components to it, it's not gone to the Transportation Commission. That's not your fault. That's something in the dynamics of how these things work, which I don't understand, but I think it would be better if it were revised somehow. Similarly, there's another development called the North Lawrence Riverfront that you're probably aware of. Also another of layers of multimodal transportation that the developer didn't really take in any consideration when that was brought to the Planning Commission again. And the Planning Commission looks at transportation, but only in a narrow scope, basically motor vehicles. Traffic analysis, ingress, egress, the various streets, collectors, arterials, and the impact the development might have on motor vehicles, as well as parking and things like that, but they don't really address multimodal. So it seems like that is something that this body should be looking at. It should be part of your purview. I don't know how this might change, but you might request that somebody look into that. I know that other bodies, public advisory boards, lesser than this commission, have brought forth things like the Food Policy Council brought forth the urban agricultural regulations to the City Commission, and that got adopted. The Sustainability Advisory Board has brought forth the Climate Protection Plan, as well as the peak oil plan, requested the City Commission, and those both were adopted by the City Commission. So I think, you have every right to ask some questions about this and see if your scope might include more multimodal things, maybe at the level of preliminary plats, which is where the Planning Commission sees it, something or other. That's basically what I would like to suggest, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Having done, we'll move on to item number 3, the Sidewalk Hazard Mitigation Program. Keep in mind the action is to receive the staff presentation on this program. I don't believe we were being asked to approve or recommend.
That's correct.
Just be good listeners tonight.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a question before we continue.
Okay.
Are we not to make any comment on public presentation?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. If you read the paragraph carefully, it says, let's see, as a general practice, there will be no discussion. This group is typically not. I think that a little bit of discussion is okay, personally. I don't think we want to move it into, a real broad discussion of something like that. And I think with respect to us, I think some of these things we're hearing for the first time, and I personally would like to have a little time to think about it. But,
Well, given that, could I make a comment?
Yeah,
Ask
sure.
for a discussion.
yeah, sure.
I would like to say that transportation should be part of land use planning, and we should be more involved with what's happening in the planning commission, with the plating and the site plans, because we've always had this black hole where things fell in between, and that's one of the gaps that we need to close.
Okay,
And
thank you. We can certainly talk about that more, if that's something you'd like to put on an agenda item, or, please do so.
So
Okay,
I want to
Yeah.
make a comment on that too. I agree with that. I feel like when I look back at the agenda and sort of what I envisioned that the Transportation Commission would become, there are a lot of things that we're not addressing. It's like, we decided to take the, some things off and make them administrative, but I don't think the idea when we took traffic calming off and made it administrative was to have fewer things for us to look at and talk about, and I think that that's actually what we're seeing. And so all those things that are important to sort of making Lawrence more cohesive, as we hopefully, like our plan sort of suggests, start, do more infill, I feel like the Transportation Commission is not really part of that. So I
Okay.
actually agree with that sentiment, and I think our agendas show it. So.
well, I would like to point out, too, that item number 6 is commission items. And that's kind of an open-ended, Dave, if you want to comment on this, please do, but that's kind of an open-ended opportunity for us to bring up things like that. And Carol, I think that would be a great time to consider, maybe a broader discussion about that subject that you brought up. But I do think that we ought to take advantage of item number 6 a little more. And that's an opportunity for everybody here to bring things to the table. So let's keep that in mind going down the road. Okay, you want to try it again?
All right, good evening, Commissioners. I'm Mark Teal with the Municipal Services and Operations Department. And it's hard to believe after, I was trying to think today, has it been 3 years or 4 years since we kind of started? But it's really 3 years since we really got into the meat and potatoes of the Sidewalk Hazard Mitigation Program and what it's going to look like. It's been to you all a couple times. It's been to the commission a couple times. So this is we're here, it's here. So this is a great opportunity to kind of give you a short kind of update on where the program is. Wow, it worked. So in 2016, the city commission directed the city manager and staff to develop a program that would actively look into elimination of sidewalk hazards throughout our community. And then in 2017, staff presented the first draft or first version of that program to the commission. I think your commission saw it as well. We had lots of input, lots of feedback. So we spent the next year looking at options, looking at revisions, came back to the commission in March of 18, and at that point, they had comments and input, but basically told the city manager, let's proceed with this program. And then in August of 2018, they actually adopted a budget to support the program. They allocated $1 million of general fund monies, $200,000 for city repairs that are deemed our responsibility to eliminate, and $800,000 for financial aid. So just kind of short history for you. The first sidewalk, it's probably not the first, but in recent history, the first sidewalk history inventory was done in 2006. It was a 10,000-foot flyover just to see what was out there and confirm what we really knew, that the sidewalk infrastructure in this community was in fairly bad shape and needed to be addressed. Then in 2014, we did another, maybe this one you could call a 5,000-foot flyover, a little bit more in depth, where we actually identified and quantified some numbers. And as you can see from the numbers there's a lot of need out there in the community. And so with this program, we developed 8 zones as kind of the ground or the footing for how this program is going to be administered. And Zone 1, which is basically west of Wakarusa and north of Bob Billings Parkway, was identified for the 2019 zone. And as you can see, we have 430 hazard defects that were identified and 25 ADA handicap ramps that need to be mitigated. That's the zone for 2019. The other 7 zones yet have to be determined which zone is going to go next. Really, the 19 zone, and what we've told the commission all along was we needed an area where we could learn. So I've heard the word pilot zone, but whatever you want to call it, it's an area where city staff is going to learn a lot about actively pursuing sidewalk hazards in our community. There's things that you just can't foresee are going to happen, and we're going to have to be able to be flexible and adjust. So I anticipate sometime later this year, maybe towards the later part of the year, city staff's going to come back with some amendments to this policy, or at minimum, changes to the administration of the policy and how we pursue this issue. So the actual program for 19, first notices are going out this coming Monday, March 11th. We have already begun soliciting bids for the city work, to hire a contractor for the city's portion. That went out on February 20th, and it bids on March 12th. We anticipate taking that bid to the city commission on March 19th for an award. So the timeline, it's a little confusing. The property owners are going to have 60 days in the notice to make their repairs. But the timeline actually exceeds beyond 60 days because the city has to do work. If a property owner doesn't mitigate the hazard on their own, then the city staff is going to recommend condemnation for those sidewalks, and then those sidewalks would be repaired after that 60 days. So really the window for sidewalk repairs is March and June, and it may even spread into July depending on the numbers that we have to take on ourselves that aren't mitigated by the property owners. So with the program, one of the things that the commission directed staff to include in the program was a financial aid piece. So there's 2 financial assistance packages. One's a income-based program, and it is based on the Housing and Urban Development 80% in family income guidelines. And so if you meet those qualifications, you would qualify then for the city to take on the repairs on your behalf at no cost to you as a property owner. The one caveat for that is you have to be a residential property, you have to be owner-occupied property to qualify. Then the cost sharing or grant assistance program is a 50-50 share. That program was put in the policy to help property owners who have sidewalks on more than one side of their property, to help with the quantity of sidewalk that there. If you qualify for that and you're residential owner-occupied property as well, the city would take on half of the cost to make those repairs. So the other piece of the program is the bids that we're going to get March 12th and hopefully get awarded on the 19th of this month. Those unit prices will also be extended to private property owners if they want to hire our city contractor to do the work as well. And so now this is an updated slide that's not in your packet. I updated it just this weekend. It actually has the full link now to the webpage, which you may have seen when the city commission, city manager's report was released on Friday. It has this link as well. But we have a fully active webpage that's up and running now, has all the information about the program if you want to delve into that more. And with that, I'd love to answer any questions you have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would also, going back to Carol's question, kind of review our purpose here in terms of receiving presentations like this. And I'm probably as guilty as anybody of trying to blend the question with the discussion. And my understanding, the way this should work, and perhaps works best, is we hear the presentation, we have an opportunity to ask for questions, limited discussion, and then we go into the public comment. And then we bring it back for the discussion. So I think that's going to work best to try to clarify, ask questions at this stage in the game. And I think we can bring you back up later too to,
Sure, be glad to.
to help us
Accommodate
with the
any questions,
discussion
yeah.
points. So, does anybody have any questions? Carol?
My questions are on cost. Do you have any idea how much the typical homeowner will be paying for sidewalk repair?
I don't, because there's a multitude of ways that the hazard can be eliminated. So if you as a property owner choose to do the repair yourself, whether you hire a contractor or you have the skill sets to take on that repair yourself, it's going to depend. If you have an opportunity to grind the sidewalk, it will be a lot less expensive than doing a remove and replace. The hazards that were identified were anywhere from 25 square feet to, I think the largest one was 225 square feet. So it's going to vary. So I'm sorry I don't have a number. Typically, I think, Dave, what did we get? What was your last bid for square yards?
$40 to $50.
So we're looking, I think in the engineer's estimate for our bid, I estimated $11 a square foot. Not, his bid was square yard. We're doing this as a square foot because our repairs are going to be significantly smaller. So it could be minimal, could be, some of them could be quite expensive.
So, say an ordinary person has to do sidewalk repair, and they want to pay for it, but they can't do it all at once because it costs $1,000. Can they break that up in more than one payment on the property tax? Is there any avenue for them to do that?
Well, I can answer some of that question. I don't know the full process of the county treasurer and how that works for assessment to your taxes, but I can answer the part about how it gets to that, how it gets to them to do that. So if you don't make the repairs, you can't voluntarily say, I just want the city to do it and assess me. In order for you to take that, if you want to call it an option, you would have to not make the repairs, and the city would have to bring your sidewalk back to the commission, and the city commission would have to condemn your sidewalk. Then, which in turn would mean they would direct the city to make the repairs on your behalf. Then we would send you a bill. If you didn't pay the bill, then that cost would be sent to the county clerk to assess to your property taxes. The downside of doing that is that if you take it to that direction, in addition to the cost that would be incurred to have the actual work done, there's a 10% administrative fee that would be also assessed, and then any interest that the county charges for carrying that on your taxes. Did that help?
Kind of, thank you.
Okay.
So, let me understand, so a homeowner can't just say, I want the city to do it? They have to go through that entire process?
That's correct. They have, the individual property owner has the option to use it's the same as what you're suggesting, John. They have the option to have our contractor do it. They would just have to call us and we would help them get in contact with the contractor if they don't have, if they're not able to do that, or if they prefer to have the city to help them make that connection. But then it would be between the contractor and the property owner to work out the wins and the payment and all
And they
that.
pay the contractor.
And they would pay the contractor directly, yeah.
Okay.
So they do have that option.
Okay.
How much of of this zone, what percentage of this zone would you think would be done in this year, in 2019?
Which percentage of the 2019 zone will be done
Well,
this
if you
year?
look at the zone and you've identified which areas need improvement or hazards or whatever, what percentage of that work do you think would be done this year, regardless of how it's accomplished through, an assessment or?
Sure. The timeline for each zone is to have the complete process from letters sent out all the way through to having those properties who fail to make the repairs, condemnation, billing, and assessment to the county clerk in time for them to assess for the next tax cycle. So it's a one-year timeline for
Okay.
each zone.
Okay. And is the second zone, have you all prioritized the zone?
We haven't selected the second zone yet.
Okay.
There's been a lot of discussion about which zone should go next. There's also been discussion about what should be the process for making that selection. And quite honestly, I've been pushing to wait a little bit. I know everybody wants to know what's 2020, what's the next zone? And there is a timeline when that decision has to ultimately be made because staff needs to go out and do the inspections. We need to prepare cost estimates so that we can come back to the commission to get a budget adopted by August for 2020. But I think one of the things that I would like to see them take into consideration is some learning curve from this year. And this is why this area we picked, because we knew it wasn't going to be the worst area, the worst zone in the city of Lawrence. And so, like I said earlier, we're going to learn a lot about how long it actually is going to take. I mean, we've got this, and I don't know if I can work the Elmo or not. Dave, do you know how to make that happen? I can. I have to have my 9-year-old at home help with this kind of stuff too. It's going to be hard to see that, but I wanted to show it to you more from the standpoint. Oh, man. Good. I gotta get my glasses. Okay. So really, there's a lot of information on this, but really, I wanted you to see this so that you could see that staff put a lot of time, and we worked with the city attorney's office, we worked with the county treasurer to come up with the timeline so that what we thought we could get done in a year. So it's my belief that we can meet all these goals and these milestones in this program in 1 year, but we're gonna, like I said, letters are gonna go out next Monday, and within 30 days, we're gonna find out how many people are contacting us. I hope it's a lot, but we won't know until 30 days out. If we're having to send out second notices of hazard violations to 75% of the defective sidewalk property owners, that's going to be a little concerning that this process may take a little bit longer than we thought. And so those numbers may have to be adjusted.
One other question anyway is, obviously we're in the implementation stage on this for this year, and we're happy to get this information. I'm kind of curious, Dave, and looking down the road, how you see the Transportation Commission involved in looking, evaluating what happened this year, be involved in selecting the next area that would be considered, and just how would you tie us into this?
Well, as Mark said, we'll see how this project goes this year, and then there will be things that I think we're going to need to refine with it, and there may be things that we bring to this board to get to get feedback on what the priority areas are or how to go about the process. So I think we'll just, time will tell as we get into this project and this endeavor, and the direction to do this is, goes way back to one of the recommendations from the Bike Ped Issues Task Force to start for the city to establish a program to address sidewalk maintenance, and this is the program that we are moving forward with this year, based on the city commission direction last year. So if I'm sure there will be questions and concerns that come up as we proceed, and we'll see how this board may or may not interact with that in the future.
We'd be eager to help.
Yeah, and I might also add, Steve, one of the things that is going to make this program successful is some of the things that we've been doing, and that's asking for opinions and help. There's no way staff is going to be able to figure this out all by ourselves. It's a community, this is a big project, and it's going to take a lot of community input to get us there.
Well, I like field trips.
Good.
You know, I'd be happy to go, you know, at some point, and go out to Northwest Lawrence and look at some of the conditions. And, you know, it's one thing talking about it, it's another thing seeing it. And there might be a point where we could even consider a field trip sometime, maybe one of our study sessions, or, you know, some other time too.
Okay.
So,
That might be a good idea to go out and look
Yeah.
as we're doing work in the
Yeah.
2019 zone.
Yeah.
See how that looks.
and as the year goes on, it'd be nice to look at some of the areas too. I know we can do this on our own, but, you know, having you guys point, you know, at things, would be
Yeah,
really helpful.
so that's a good, actually interesting comment. So if you haven't gone to the website yet, there is an interactive map on the website. Yeah, I guess I could do that.
While he's looking for that, I can tell you that when they started that process about a year ago, just going through and marking, like, we had some on the Free State property we
I don't
already
want to do
repaired.
that.
Okay,
So, I mean, the markings were there, we knew what the issue was, we just took care of it because we were gonna have to. So, I don't know if that's happened anywhere else, but when you get that fluorescent paint, you just take care of it.
Hey, Kurt, do you have any suggestions why the?
Chrome at the bottom,
Okay.
yeah, and then I hit plus, remember that website address of yours?
I did, oh, I got what, okay. All right.
I can pull it back up, I can't remember exactly what it was.
I can't type, but this is a normal keyboard. I have one of those. And I can't do deep. Let's try that. There we go.
are you in there?
So there's this really cool interactive,
I'm sorry, is it /sidewalk?
it's / sidewalk hyphen hazard.
Thanks for.
And wow, this does not look at all right. I'm going to minimize that because this is the first time I've looked at it where it's done that. I've looked at it at home and it works fine, so I'll have to ask about that tomorrow. Our GIS department did a really nice job with this. So all these colorful squares that are on there are actual hazards that were identified during the inspection that we did. And you can click on any one of them. You actually can type in up here in the left corner, if you're a property owner and you're curious in that zone, if you have it, or for that matter, anywhere in the city, you can type in your address, and it'll take you right to your parcel. And if you don't have a colorful square on your property, you don't have a hazard. If you do, you can click on it, and it'll give you, this is not, wow, this is crazy. I don't know. Kurt, do you know why this is not working?
No, actually,
Okay, well, I'm gonna get you there, but I'm gonna get you there. For some reason, the browser looks really funny tonight, but, so you can type in your address, you can see if you have a defect on your parcel, and then there's a link there to a photo that was taken the day that the inspection occurred, and you can see what the hazard looks like. In this example here, you can see there's a crack with a vertical separation that has to be eliminated. That, to me, looks like that's a candidate for grinding possibly versus remove and replace. But that's going to have to be a decision the property owner ultimately makes on their own. And the city, everywhere we developed a really, what I think is a really extensive FAQ section, and it's searchable by it's a word searchable FAQ. So if you have questions about, can I do this? Can I not do that? What, is this a requirement? Is that a requirement? And almost every one of these says, if you have questions, please call the city and ask. Staff is going to be more than willing to kind of lead you through the process, come out and meet with you at your property and talk about all the options. We want this to be successful. We don't want to just throw it at the property owner and say, okay, you're on your own, and if you don't do it, we're going to bring you back to the commission and slam dunk you and get your money. So the end goal of this program is to eliminate the hazardous sidewalks in the community and really get on what I think some of your goals are, and definitely what the commission's goals are, is a walkable community. That's the ultimate goal of this program.
Can I just, sorry.
That's okay.
The rule that owners pay for sidewalks, that already existed before this program? This
Yes.
program didn't create that rule?
Yes.
This program is just enforcing?
Yes, state statute and city code both require, or both make it the
owners.
responsibility of maintenance.
And
the
has
property
the
owner.
city, in the past, over time, sent notes to owners?
I didn't hear, I can.
Has the city in the past, over time, sent notes to owners
We
to
have.
fix certain?
Up until this program, the city has had a program that was reactive. You could had a link, just like you could turn in a pothole or a damaged curb. You could turn in a sidewalk that you thought was hazardous. The city would go out, inspect it, and send a letter, and that's where it stopped. If you made the repair, thank you for being a good citizen and doing it. If you didn't, it just stopped right there. The city didn't take it to the next step.
Are there different types of property owners, like commercial or
There are.
public, and city property?
City properties? Yes, there was, there's about 75 defects that the city's responsible for, and approximately 25 ADA ramps that are ours, that we know, that we actually have a bid out right now to do the work to repair those. That's of the 430 total defects.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. The first one of which is, can you hear me properly? I know sometimes sitting down there, it's hard to hear people, so just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Sweet. I also don't want to blow out your eardrums. Okay. So, let's see, I got a couple questions. Let's go with the first one. Okay. So, it seems to me that a 60-day deadline is pretty tight, having recently completed a lot of repairs in my home that took a long time to get through. I'm sure concrete's a little bit simpler than HVAC, for example, but in the unlikely event that somebody is able to get a better deal from a private contractor versus what the city rate is, but they can't get it in that 60-day window, is there anything in the FAQs about having an extension filed, for example? Because the city will still be doing work after the property owner, so.
That's a good question. And actually, the city code and state statute says 7 days. The city can go out and repair the sidewalk with 7 days' notice. So that's what the code says, so we didn't follow that, we did the 60 days. But the timeline that I showed you earlier, so the 60-day needs to be in there to meet that timeline to get it all the way to the county. So there's a process, right? So at the end of 60 days, you haven't repaired it, staff is gonna have to prepare a memo, come to the commission to get condemnation. That's gonna take probably 30 days to 45 days for that to happen. Then, once the commission condemns it and we then award it to our contractor to make the repairs, that's gonna be another couple of weeks. So ultimately, as a property owner, we are encouraging the property owners to make the repairs in a timely as fashion as possible. But ultimately, if you're a property owner, you have up until the day our contractor shows up with their backhoe to tear your sidewalk out to fix it yourself. Once our contractor's on the ground working, we've already engaged him and he's under contract to do it
So it
himself.
sounds like you maybe could technically get an extension, but maybe till, would that be June, I guess, once the city starts doing their own?
Yeah, if you
property.
figure the end of, April, yeah, you could technically get into June or maybe even July before our contract, depending on how many we have to do.
Yeah,
How many condemnations there are. There is not a provision in the program that you can call and we can grant you an extension.
Okay.
That does not exist in the policy as it was written. But I can't imagine that staff is not going to be willing to work with property owners to get this done. I mean, there's going to be a time in that time chart that I showed you that we've got to do it. It's, in order for it to get done and be assessed, this date is going to be the drop dead date, and that date will be shared with that property owner if they're making a good effort to get it done.
okay. All right, let's see. Another question I had, I know this is obviously way down the line, but just out of curiosity, since obviously Lawrence is not the only city in the country that has this particular policy on who pays for what, are there any lessons that have been learned by staff when, preparing this particular program from other cities that have raised questions on, any major open-ended questions that you're probably going to look at during this pilot phase, right?
Sure.
Like, is there anything either good or bad that you've seen with similar cities?
Yeah, no, that's another good question, and I actually researched probably at least 30 other cities as we were developing this program, and then went back and looked at them some more. Some of the stuff that's in our website, we stole from other cities that we liked, the questions that they were, FAQs that they were putting in there, so we didn't try to reinvent the wheel. What I did learn was the overwhelming majority of communities are doing these programs similar to the way that we're doing it. There was very few examples that I could find where the city actually took on the responsibility for sidewalks.
Yeah, it seems like in the research I've done, there's really no rhyme or reason to which city does what. It's either the citizens are responsible, the city's responsible, and it doesn't really matter what size, what region, what political persuasion your city is. It's totally random, so.
It is, and I looked outside of Kansas. I looked geographically across the United States, and I couldn't find one example of any community or any state that it wasn't the responsibility of the adjacent property owner to maintain it. Some local municipalities chose, I think Lenexa may be one of them here locally that takes it on. But overwhelmingly, the majority of communities put the responsibility or kept the responsibility on the property owners to maintain.
I just have kind of a question of curiosity. Were you about to ask a question? Okay. There are 430 defects that were identified. How does the city plan to basically know that they've all been resolved? Will there be another inspection, or will you rely on permits that have been processed to know that the defects have been fixed?
Yeah, Charlie. So the letter that they're going to receive tells the property owner, when your hazard is fixed, please call the city at a minimum, once it's done at a minimum, so we can come out and verify that it's done and done correctly. It also encourages them to call and ask us to come out and help them during the process if they need that. But ultimately, if we don't hear anything from the property owner at the end of 60 days, those properties that we don't have on our list of having some resolution to, we'll go out and get a visual inspection, re-inspection from city staff, and either note that it's done or it's not done.
So if I call, then it's noted, or if you actually come out and visually inspect it? Like, I'm trying to get clear on how do we
So
know
Charlie,
that it's been
at your
resolved?
property, if you called the city and said, I'm working on it, we would make a note of that in the file, on the spreadsheet that we have, that your
Would you still inspect it, or would you?
Yes.
Okay.
Ultimately, every property will get re-inspected to make sure that it's in compliance, because the repairs have to meet our city standards and specifications, and they also have to be ADA compliant when they're done.
Thanks.
What would be the normal life of a new sidewalk?
Oh, goodness.
It depends highly.
A normal sidewalk that was poured to our city standards, if you could keep people from driving on it and keep people from planting trees
Yeah.
right next to it,
Or snow. from
100
falling.
years, there's no reason why, given some geological shift in the earth, that a sidewalk wouldn't be there a long time.
Did you say 20 years? 30 years?
There's sidewalks in East Lawrence that are still in good shape, that probably 100 years
Bend,
old.
right?
What's that?
Brick tends to bend a little bit, whereas concrete
Brick
tends to.
does.
You know.
It's hard to say. If a sidewalk is built correctly, it lasts a long time.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm going to leave that up. Is that okay?
Yeah, be great. Okay, time for public comment. Come to the stand and tell us who you are, and be happy to hear from you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Patrick Wilbur. I live at 521 Durham Court, and I'm with the Lawrence Sunset Alliance. When this policy came up before the City Commission a couple of years ago, we spoke out in opposition to it at that time. We remain opposed to it for several reasons. The first item I'd like to address is the ownership of the sidewalk and the responsibility for maintenance. It's important to note that state law allows for the city to require property owners to repair the sidewalk. That's something the city has discretion on in its policies, so that's something that Lawrence could change if they wanted to. And we would advocate for that because there's been a lot of discussion in Lawrence in terms of pedestrian traffic, making it part of an interwoven sort of pedestrian traffic plus bicycle traffic plus auto traffic. There's large goals there. There's a sort of kind of a grand vision there. And to do that, we need to make our sidewalks as walkable as possible, and we need to make that a priority. And the way to make that a priority, we believe, is to put that within the city budget, where those difficult decisions have to be made. The other item to note is that voters about a year and a half ago approved an extension of a sales tax. 0.3% of the penny goes into infrastructure repairs. And so that's about, I think it was about $6.3 million was the estimate that would come in per year for infrastructure on top of the money that's budgeted in the annual budget by the City Commission. So there is money there, we believe, if we want to make sidewalks a priority, and there is money there for the city to maintain them. Lastly, I think in reference to the program that allows for financial assistance to property owners that can't afford to pay for the sidewalks, I think we're still going to see a lot of property owners who are struggling to stay in their homes and struggling to pay the bills that are looking at a bill of anywhere from $200 to $300 to maybe over $1,000 to repair the sidewalk. And that's still a hardship. So even though we can help some of those people, there's still going to be a lot of people who are going to have to make very tough decisions. And I think that's an unfair position to put them in a city that values pedestrian traffic and safety. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Bonnie Effman. You want to know where I live? 408 Johnson Avenue. I've been here talking about this before to various groups. Equity continues to be my really big concern, and I don't feel like that is being addressed adequately. I want to say that I predict that this will be a big issue in the next city commission election. That the shit is going to hit the fan when these notices get sent out and people start paying attention to what's happening here. And I certainly will be supporting commissioners who will be up for city taking responsibility for this. Thank you.
Gary Weber, 907 Merle Court. Had a couple questions. Mark, what was the level of specificity on the bidding process for the city portion? Did you have defect by defect all listed out, and the contractor had to go to every defect and estimate a price, or was it based on square foot or square yard?
Oh, sure.
The bids that were sent out were based on, they weren't by address. In other words, the addresses were listed in the bid package. Those 70, I think 75 or 78 or so properties that are the city's responsibility. There was an attachment as well as a map that showed where all the locations were. But the total bid was by unit price for the total square footage of 4-inch sidewalk, 6-inch sidewalk. There was a curb and gutter pricing, and there was manhole adjustment, unit bid price. There was a bid price for a valve adjustment, and then there was 6-inch concrete adjustment, 6-inch concrete pricing requested for sidewalks that go through driveways.
Very good. So that's why in your PowerPoint presentation, you said that a homeowner can use a city contractor and have access to the city bid price. That's why, because you have a bid price that allows a homeowner to do that.
Yes, the bid package that was sent out specifically requires the contractor that is awarded this to extend the unit prices, whichever they are, all of them or one of them, to based on the actual quantity of repair that's for that individual property.
And one more question. And if you choose a city contractor, is it the same as the city in that all concrete has to be replaced, or you do grinding, or partial repairs possible? I noticed that in the city part, you're going to replace the entire panel if it's defective. Is that the case with some homeowner who use that contractor?
The pricing that was in, the way that the bid package was put out, there wasn't a request for bids for grinding or saw cutting or mud jacking or any other method other than remove and replace. I imagine that whichever contractor gets this will be more than willing to work with any contractor to perform a type of repair that they and the property owner can determine best for their property. If the city does the work through condemnation, or the cities, when we make the repairs, to your question, John, about how long can the sidewalk, or Steve, I'm sorry, how long is the sidewalk going to last? We purposely chose just to do remove and replace for our repairs because we want the repairs that are made to last as long as possible.
Good. Thank you. Well, that answers my questions. I was a little concerned about the homeowner who has a repair and wants to use a city contractor. If there wasn't a unit price, then the city contractor could come out and give a high bid, and there's no savings there. But if there is a unit price and the homeowner is willing to do a complete replacement or maybe even a grind if the contractor is willing, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Second question is about funding each year. You got $1 million this year for the aid package and multiple sidewalks. If there's money left over, does that go back into the general fund, and then next year you come up with a new number based on this one? Is that the way the funding works?
there's some uncertainty to some of those, to what could happen. There's a lot of different scenarios on that. It's our hope with this program, because the funds are general fund monies, is that whatever balance is left, if there is any in 2019, that would carry over into 2020. And so what staff will do, as I mentioned early in the presentation, whichever zone is selected for 2020, staff will have to go out and do an inspection. That will give them an understanding of how much money they need to ask the commission for the 2020 budget when the city manager submits his budget. We won't know that until that inspection is concluded. But it's our hope that whatever monies are left from this year will be carried over and can be included into the next zones, next year, next zone.
That's great news. Really, really good news. Okay, that does it. Those two I was unclear on, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gary.
Excuse me, once again, Michael Allman. It's interesting that we did start in one of the newer areas of Lawrence, and I think it's good in the sense that, considering what Mr. Teal said, the longevity of a properly built sidewalk could be 30, 50, 100 years, depending, that these are newer sidewalks for the most part, 20, 30 years maybe at the max? I have to wonder, and this is not on municipal operations and services, this is on planning and development services. That's where the inspectors are. I assume those will be the inspectors that come back to inspect this at the end of the program? City Inspection Office?
This program is being managed and inspected solely by the Municipal Services and Operation Department.
So you'll do the inspection?
Yes.
Good, good. Because I really have to question, when land developers built these subdivisions out there, they're required to build and pay for these sidewalks. And if there are subsidence or cracks and buckling or deterioration, what kind of inspection took place when these were built? That's a major question. So I would hate to have this repair happen, be done substandard, and deteriorate once again and have to go through it again. So I'm glad it's Municipal Operations Services that's handling the inspections as well. So that was my comment. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Hello, everyone. Courtney Shipley. I'm gonna have to be two people if you guys will indulge me. I am the chair of the Lawrence Association of Neighborhoods, and in that capacity, I am empowered only to reiterate what Lan has said in the past, and succinctly that is that Lan is of the opinion that there has not been enough research into an equitable solution for sidewalk maintenance that is financed by taxpayers citywide. If I could give an example of an inequity there that I know at least one other person has alluded to. I live on Castle, sort of famously. I just got brand new, gorgeous sidewalks on both sides of the street. Cost me nothing. Now all my neighbors a little north to me get to pay out of pocket up to $2,000, maybe dollars. And they may not get aid, they may be able to get aid. That's a disparity that we should take seriously. And yes, we can home rule out of it. City Commission could have taken this. I'm actually very grateful personally to staff for admitting this is a new policy. There was some attempt to say that this wasn't a new policy, which is why City Commission chose to not vote on it, because it was not politically expedient for some people to be caught voting for something that is going to be as unpopular as this is. So what you could do, I know we all just came here to fuss about it, but you could still, at transportation, say that they could continue to look at this. So I realize you're just here to accept this report, but if enough of you felt that it should be looked at again for certainly the 90th time, you could make that suggestion to city commission and realize that by November, you may have a completely different city commission that would look at sidewalks in a completely different way. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, it's back up here.
Bonnie Uffman, she brought up equity, which is not talked about very much, and I wondered if she would elaborate a couple sentences.
This comes up in so many ways. The most obvious one is if the sidewalk is on the other side of the street, there's none on mine. I'm gonna walk on that sidewalk on the other side of the street, but I'm paying nothing. There's Castle is an obvious one. There are just so incredibly many. Or if I make $100 more than that 80%, then I pay for the whole thing, whether. And if I can't pay it in the 60 days or a lot of time, then the price goes up. I mean, it's like equity has not been considered from my point of view. And that's really important to me. By the way, I don't have a sidewalk in front of my house. It's not a personal issue. I just care about equity and am appalled at this process.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
So it sounds like to me there's potential here for a study session in the future. Being brand new to this whole thing, I don't know if you've talked about this in the past, but we were recently looking at a study session and what to do for a study session for the upcoming year. And since, this is a pilot program, I don't know how possible it is to change the course at this point, but it might be worth just looking at what other cities have done and seeing if it has been better to take it upon the city and their government finances to do it, what their lessons learned, maybe what's happened in other places with the long-term obligation on the homeowners instead of the city. And I mean, I hate to say that because I know you guys have done that research already. That's why you rolled it out in this way. But I also know that, I'm not sure I've heard anybody who's so far in support of this, which is a tricky position to be in. So, yeah, I don't know. It seems like it could definitely be a study session coming up just to see what other options there are, because it looks like Lawrence does have options, which is interesting. So.
I can give some background on this, but also, since my memory often fails me for me, this is wrong. The Bicycle Pedestrian Issues Task Force looked at this pretty extensively several years ago, and we had several ideas that I thought were far better than this. Some of them ended up not being legal in the state of Kansas. But I think it was generally, what ended up happening was it was put in the Bicycle and Pedestrian Issues Task Force final report that the City Commission should come up with something, which I think was probably a mistake. But that was where we're at. And so the difficulty I see now is, I also did a lot of research on different cities, and what I would find was, regardless of what the policy was, it wasn't necessarily this policy that determined whether the sidewalks were in good shape. There were lots of other factors. There was, I thought it was Austin, but I'm not finding it now, that repaired its own sidewalks, but considering the funding that they had, it was going to be like 100 and something years before all the sidewalks were repaired. So it was still not addressing what they needed to address. So it seemed to me that it didn't matter necessarily what the policy was. A lot of it was enforcement or funding. But I still see all the issues that I'm concerned with, and I still have all these feelings about the equity issues. I use sidewalks a lot, and I don't have one, and I'm happy to pay for them. I also, even being able to do things like pay for a sidewalk, if I had a $1,000 bill for a sidewalk, that would be really hard, even being able to do that. I feel like we're not being asked to do anything here. Our action is receive staff presentation on sidewalk hazard mitigation program. So as a transportation commission, we're up here, we're supposed to be the ones advising on this, and we just received these. No recommendation for approval or anything. But I also see that we're sitting here talking about this 4 years later. and sidewalks still aren't being repaired. And so it seems to me that all the things that have been said are true. Once it really gets going, especially once it goes to the northwest area first, and I actually think it'll go there and it'll be a huge deal. And I mean, that if it comes to the east side after that, are we gonna wait 8 years to bring it to the east? Where the sidewalks are the worst, I guess. So I see all sorts of reasons that this is gonna be a really big deal and it's gonna be quite a mess. But I think maybe that's what we need to do. And in the process, we might get some sidewalks fixed. I think it's going to be something that the city can't handle once it really gets going. That's my sense. If it's enforced like the program says it's going to be enforced, I think it sounds like it's going to be an uphill battle. So.
Charlie, you're just dying to get into this one.
No comment.
Okay. Ron?
No, I mean, I recall sitting in hearings, as we were kind of developing, I remember us talking about some of the different options as they were going through it. I think it was more of a kind of an update was what we were receiving. I agree with Aaron's sentiment that I think at some point you have to get messy. It's going to be messy because it's the first time you're trying something like that. That's back to, I think one of the reasons why you selected the region you did was because it had the least amount of repairs. So it was because as you start talking about moving to the east, well, then we start also talking about historical sidewalks and brick versus concrete. And I remember those were discussions that came up when we talked about this before. It's never easy talking about money, whether it's your own money or the city's money, as far as how it's prioritized and used. And to that end, I think there's something in place here that it may not be very popular, but we have to at some point start making some progress somewhere. And I think the city may see, we start this program, like Aaron said, and it may be that this isn't working out quite the way we wanted to. Maybe we need to go back and revise it. But I think at some point we do have to take some action, or we're just going to keep having sidewalks that aren't repaired and they're going to get in worse shape, or accidents are going to occur or something like that.
Bonnie, we want to keep it up here for now.
Yeah.
We'd like to keep the discussion up here for now. Okay. John?
I agree. Although I don't think this is perfect, I think we certainly need to try something, because what we've done the past numerous years has not been very successful. I do agree that I think it could be quite an issue, but I think we've got to try something. We've got to move forward with something.
Anything to add, Carol?
I'm with, let's have a study session and bring ourselves up to speed.
Okay. Nick, any more?
Well, I'm the one who knows the least about this, so it's hard for me to say much, but I feel like somebody commented on the way of, or it's possible I saw this in the LJ World comment section, I forget, but somebody said, well, other commissions send letters to the city commission on what they would like to see done, or what their recommendations are on certain things. Like, I think, was the Historic Resources Commission that recently sent something about design guidelines for East Lawrence, for example. It could be even something like that could be the outcome, that maybe as election season is coming up, if we do for some reason feel that we want to change our course, or as a commission we change our mind, or see how things play out in Northwest Lawrence, perhaps that would be an appropriate response at some point. Spitballing here, but we'll see.
Sure. Donna?
Can I clarify, Courtney said she just got a new sidewalk on Castle. Does this policy mean then if there's damage to that sidewalk, is Courtney then responsible for her section of that?
I can't answer your question specifically about her sidewalk, because I don't know the details on it. But sidewalks that are built by the city have a 1-year warranty, and they get re-inspected before that 1-year warranty, just as does any other infrastructure projects that the city undertakes. They get inspected for that warranty. If there's a defect discovered, then the contractor that did the work is held to the standard to re-perform that work to our satisfaction. Sidewalks that are considered rec pass in the city, which that is anything that's 5 feet or greater. So we have a variety of that. We have some, I think there's some 6 foots, there's some 8 foots, there's 10-foot pass. Those are all going to be the responsibility of the city to maintain. In this particular zone, there's a sidewalk on the south side of 6th Street that is 8 foot wide, and there's quite a number of hazards on it. As you could see from, if we brought back the map, those were identified as being city's responsibility to repair on this 2019 zone. Did that get at your question?
Yeah. And also, just, are there, with new development, new neighborhoods, is there a requirement that the developer now in every property have sidewalk?
I think our standards require sidewalks on both sides. And to, if I could, since kind of in the line of the question that you're asking about sidewalks, one of the things that I think is going to happen with this program, and that I'm hopeful happens with this program, is property owners are going to, and I think, Michael, you the one that made the comment about this, property owners are going to pay much more attention to their own sidewalks now that they know and they see that it's going to ultimately be their responsibility. And if there's something wrong with their sidewalk, they're going to get a letter. So if utility contractor A pulls up on their sidewalk and breaks it, and a number of these hazards are clearly a result of somebody driving on a sidewalk, I think the property owner is going to say, hey, contractor A just broke my sidewalk, and pursue it instead of just blowing it off and not paying attention to it. So I think this whole program is going to raise awareness about sidewalks in general. At least that's my hope.
Thanks. Well, I don't have a lot to add to the discussion. I do think that when this discussion started several years ago, and even today, you've got polarizing, very opposite, extreme ideas on how to solve the solution. And personally, I think that what's on the table now is a compromise, in many ways. I'm not sure anybody's happy totally, but there's probably some people that are halfway happy, and that's better than doing nothing. And I do like to hear you all staff say that you want to evaluate this as you go. And what I think in terms of what Nick's talking about in terms of getting study sessions going is I would really like to offer that this group can help. And I think that if we get our teeth into it, that we could offer the city commission maybe a little more input and in-depth thinking about this down the road. And so I would offer that, Dave and Chuck, for you all to consider, connecting us to this whole process in a way that's certainly more involved than reporting, which we appreciate. And also I'd keep in mind that this serves as a pretty good public forum for people to come and express themselves. And I think that's one of our, a good reason we're all here, is to hear what people say. And we thank you all for coming in and sharing that. And if that's clear, let's continue to talk about how we can get more connected with this and be more helpful in more of a strategic way down the road.
We'll know quite a bit more in the next 30 days after we send out the letters and we go to the commission with our bids and we see how things are working. It's either we're gonna have a really big response, or it's gonna kind of work its way through. So we can bring back a report as we kind of go through this.
Good.
And let you know what's going on. I'm sure the commission will want to know as well.
Good.
I'm sure they'll hear about it.
Right. Okay. let's move on to item number 4, the retreat summary and discussion. Dave, is this yours?
Yes. I attached a summary of our discussion at the retreat. I think it was a really good opportunity for everyone to have some time to get together, and we talked about, I guess, different topics and goals for this group, and staff goals for our multimodal staff team. And I think some of these, some of the topics that got brought up and the issues are good to kind of document so that we can help develop some items to talk about this year with study sessions. And so I think it went good, and just if anyone else had any general comments, would welcome those. I think that one of the things that we talked about at the meeting was potentially holding our study sessions in conjunction with our regular meetings. Since we hadn't had good regular attendance at the study sessions in past years, just based off of the time, that if the agendas are a little lighter now that we're not reviewing all of these traffic safety requests that we used to review during this time, that we would hold the study sessions either before or after our regular meeting. I think staff's thought was that it would be preferable to hold the study sessions after our regular meeting so that we could kind of save the same regular meeting time at 6 p.m. Every week, and have general public comment at the beginning of the meeting. That was, I think our recommendation would be to do it after. And attached to the agenda on the last page is the calendar, and I started to put a few of the topics on the calendar under study sessions and regular agenda items. It's not a end-all be-all list, but a starting point that we can build from and start filling those in as we continue on through the year. So I referred back to the discussion we had at the retreat and the issues, and started putting in some suggested topics there. So if you go down, this is on the last page of your agenda under the calendar. There's some study session topics there, and I know during general public comment earlier tonight, we kind of talked about, or we had the question come up about land use and the planning projects, and that might be that kind of how that works, transportation / land use relationship. That's a suggested topic already on study session agenda there. So can certainly add things to this. It's just a starting point, but really I think one of the things that would like to I guess get feedback on from this group is officially revising the schedule to change the study session calendar. And I would propose that we would just, going forward throughout the rest of the year, if we had an item to talk about on the study session, have a study session topic, it would be after the regular meeting each month. When we set the calendar up at the beginning of the year, we did bi-monthly. We planned on a bi-monthly study session. I think we were going to do it at noon on Thursdays. So instead of doing it bi-monthly, we would have it every month if there was a topic to discuss. So that's my thought on the study session calendar. But certainly would like to get feedback from the commission on any other thoughts they had from the retreat, or things that maybe I didn't include on the summary that you feel should be a topic of conversation this year that we could also plug in as suggested topics on our calendar.
Well, let's get the timing of the study sessions down. Is everybody okay with Dave's suggestion? We did talk about doing it prior to these meetings, and I guess that would be my own personal preference, just because the later the evening gets, the lower the energy and enthusiasm can be sometimes. But I'm open to either myself, but as long as the agenda's don't take until 9 o'clock, I think we could be okay. Is it basically, the calendar's set up to start these meetings at 6, and the public is used to that, so pretty much.
Yeah, correct. And if we wanted to do the study sessions before the meeting, I think we could do that if we did start them at 5, from 5 to 5:45 or 5:50. So that's an option too. But it may be tough for folks to get here at that time. So that's another option. I think staff would be fine with that. I'd have to double check the commission room, but it should be available.
I think too that staff, or some of us that had trouble coming to the daytime one, at least that 5 o'clock start might be a little bit easier for people than the 3 o'clock start, if for working or traveling.
Personally, I like the earlier time myself, because I think it helps us set a time to stop.
Right.
Instead of continuing to go. I'm afraid if we go at the end, we could just continue to go.
Well, I think we also talked about trying to connect the study sessions to the agendas. And if there was something that would be good to review a little bit, 2040 or whatever, maybe some of the codes and guidelines and policies that would, be meaningful in terms of the agenda items, they could be a study session item, So, Charlie, Aaron, are you guys okay with a 5 o'clock start?
Yeah, I think my preference would be to get the study session done early
Okay,
and then have a meeting.
okay.
I think from the public's perspective, if the study session happens kind of without a real schedule, it just happens after our business meeting, then
Right.
it could be difficult for them to anticipate exactly when to arrive if they want to come for that only.
And Dave, we would set up down here with tables, and then we just break it up and
Yeah,
move up.
I think we'd hold it like we have been.
Yeah.
The
Is
study
there anybody
sessions.
that would have trouble making a 5 o'clock?
I was wondering, do study sessions generally require input from the public or offer input from the public, or is it pretty much just us talking?
Generally, they do not.
Okay, so in that case, that's maybe a little bit less sensitive to when the public can show up, it sounds like. So if we keep the regular one at 6, doing one early, that's predictable. And the public could make if they wanted to, but doesn't necessarily have to really be a part of the process,
Isn't Catherine a commuter?
Pardon me?
Isn't
That's
she a
true.
commuter?
She's already had trouble with the 3 o'clock ones or the 3:30 ones, so 5 might be a little easier for her.
Okay.
Yeah, I think she actually mentioned that at the retreat,
She did.
that 5 o'clock would be easier for her. Or maybe it was 5:30.
Yeah,
and it
she
was-
just sent an email at 7 saying she's just leaving Kansas City right now after work.
Well, she better hurry. Well, it sounds like 5 o'clock is the way to go here. So
Okay.
let's give that a whirl. And you have us in April with the strategic plan and
Yeah.
CIP?
Yeah, that was one that came up at the retreat, and this is the time of year we're talking about the budget, and so I would need to confirm with staff if we have the availability for someone to attend to talk about it, but I just start things off, put that one in there, but we will attempt to start plugging some of these topics into different meetings and months, and if there's any feedback from the group, doesn't have to be tonight, but you can always send me an email on things you're interested in and or
Right.
questions that you have, and we can think about that.
Well, I have a couple of comments on your documentation, and the first one is it's great documentation. It's something that's easily to refer to and use as a resource as we move down the road. Having been part of retreats and, stuff like that over the years, I think the danger is to have a real, energetic, enthusiastic retreat, put it on the shelf and never look at it again. And I think that at least maybe quarterly or maybe every 4 months, we ought to have an agenda item where we pull it out and have a look at it. And, keep it in front of us, and not let it kind of get away and become a tool that we don't use. So I would really like to see that happen. And I don't know if quarterly is too often, but I think that one thing I would say, there's a lot of information there, and I have not myself gone back and thought about what are the top 3 things. The lists are very long and very, very thorough, but I think I'd ask everybody to maybe revisit them a little bit and see what pops out at you, and bring that, to commission items next month, so we can continue to use it as a tool. And last comment I have about is an item that I've really failed to bring up at the retreat, but I recall about a year ago we had a study session with Jasmine Moore, and she came, made a great presentation, and we ended that discussion with an offer to become more collaborative with them. Just seems like sustainability is something that we're all about too. And I actually sent her a few reminders that maybe one of us could go to a Sustainability Advisory Board meeting and just talk about what we could do to kind of get on the page in terms of what they're doing and what we're doing. It just seems like a natural opportunity for 2 of the advisory boards in the city to get their heads together and try to, benefit one another. Do you all want to reach out to her? Do you guys have any thoughts about that?
Well, I
Please share
think
'em.
on the multimodal staff team handout, there was a mention about transitioning from STAR to LEAD for cities. And
Oh, yeah.
I'm assuming that's under her domain.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really kind of curious, what is this new program model?
Mm-hmm.
What's the component that would be related to transportation efforts?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know when she's ready to kind of have that introduced to the public or whatever, but that might be a good time to bring her into a study session, maybe. That's a little different from the Sustainability Advisory Board, but I assume it's related, and she
Yeah,
might
I
see a
think it is.
connection there.
Well, Dave and Chuck, how would you recommend we reach out to them and just explore what we're talking about here?
Through myself.
Okay.
So I can talk with Jasmine and see on the
Okay.
sustainability topic
Okay.
what her schedule is and how that may plug into our calendar.
Okay.
So I made a note of it, and I'll add that under our other suggested topics.
Okay.
One thing that might be interesting is that she recently came to, I guess it's Planning Commission, and gave a presentation on the STAR leads change. And I remember when we got the last STAR report or whatever, one of the things that, Lawrence had made all this progress, but maybe the only area that we had actually gotten worse in was vehicle miles traveled. And so that might be something that's interesting to look at or hear more about, because that was actually not discussed a lot at the Planning Commission meeting either. So that portion of it and how it affects transportation. So.
Isn't that part of the Transportation 2040 report? It has been in the past, last chapter or something like that.
I don't know.
I think it is part of the performance metrics that they have now.
Well, I do recall from the STAR report that we got a couple of years ago that transportation infrastructure issues had a lot of opportunity for improvement. And it's been a while since I've looked at that report, but we ought to get the dust off that report too. Maybe we can talk to Jasmine about that and see what she says. Okay. Any other thoughts on the retreat?
I just have some questions. Under 2019 agenda topics, First one is traffic control. And that was rather a drastic move where we moved it all into the office. Has there ever been a need for an appeal process?
On traffic control items, we're handling all those administratively.
Right, that's great. But what if someone, if it hasn't happened yet, that's wonderful. What if someone wants to appeal the decision? Is there a need for that?
Is there,
Is there a need for a process if someone needs to appeal?
I'm not sure yet. There may be instances in the future where something needs to be appealed, but most of our decisions on traffic control items, whether or not to put a stop sign intersection, are based off of engineering warrants, and we're gonna follow those guidelines and manuals to make the decisions and the determinations.
Okay. The next question is on not the bylaws, the task force report. It's not online anymore. Could we put that back up there on its website?
Pedestrian task force?
It's not that old yet.
I will look for it. I think it's still online.
If you click
'Cause I
on,
pulled it up
the link
earlier,
from the commission, you don't get anything.
Yeah. We have there's a lot of our links now that Public Works and Utilities have merged, that a lot of links are broken, and there's a lot of work going into web pages. So I will keep that in mind. And I did pull it up through a search, but that doesn't mean that the link's still working where it used to be. So I'll make a note of that.
There's a section on our page called additional resources.
Yep, that's what
Click on that, click on transportation resources.
Yeah.
It takes you to a page and it's available there.
No, the report's not.
I'm looking at it right now.
Oh, good, it's there then.
We
That's
didn't
fine.
fix that.
Okay. Should we move on to staff items?
If we're talking about the study sessions, topics and all that, I, kind of to Carol's, not exactly point, but on that topic of the task force report, I think it would be helpful at some point this year, perhaps midway or halfway, maybe a little further, to take a look at that. I think it's important that we pay attention to it still. I think it's also notable how much progress has been made. And, out of the recommendations, I think it's been a few years now, we should be able to take some assessment of where are we at, what do we still think is important to pursue. Some of us were involved in that task force, so I think we might have kind of a peculiar interest in the success of the report, but I think it's also just the public, probably we still have some accountability to the public to see that that work is attended to, or if we think it's no longer important, maybe to signal somehow that it isn't a high priority at this point. So, I don't know, I'm thinking like August, September kind of time, once the budget's settled, and that seems like when we could sort of review that.
Sure. Sounds good.
Noted.
Okay, thanks.
And we have that one on there about land use planning for streets, that sort of thing. I don't know how to phrase it.
Transportation land use relationship.
There you
for
go.
another suggested topic. It doesn't appear to be on the future scheduled items, but it is on the suggested topics. So, yeah.
That's how it gets there.
Well, the example I gave at the retreat was 23rd Street, of course, that's the one I live near. That street is ripe for redevelopment. And we have one development on the south side. It would be nice if they were doing a presentation here, for one, before it goes up to the city. We should be giving feedback on the transportation part of it. But anyway, they're doing their thing, and it's pedestrian-oriented, and it's cyclist-oriented, and all that kind of stuff. And then across the street, there are two businesses that don't even have front doors that are brand new. And somehow, we need to get on top of this before we have another mixed match at 23rd.
Okay.
Public comment?
Well, sure, if you can be very brief about it.
You're talking about the retreat?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Michael Allman again, thank you. During I was only at the afternoon part of your retreat, and at that point, one of the items you were talking about was the neighborhood traffic management program, which when I first heard of it being announced, I was pretty excited about a holistic approach to deal with the whole system, the whole neighborhood, rather than street by street. That's how it was introduced. I think that's wise to do that. But what I heard during the retreat was quite different. It was backtracking from what I can tell. Initially, when Sustainability Action Network 5 years ago brought up the whole issue of multimodal bicycle pedestrian funding, we were wanting to get more funding support of the budget so that we don't just have a little green sign on the side of the road saying bike route or something, but doing something substantive. So we needed money. And that started happening, and we got, $100,000, $200,000, $600,000, $1 million for multimodal. And then at that point, I mentioned that we needed to be careful that this money is not dribbled out little by little, a sharrow here, a sign there, a crosswalk here, a white stripe bike lane for 2 blocks. It needed to be focused and concentrated in significant amounts to actually do something meaningful. And we're doing bicycle boulevards now. We did protected bicycle lanes on Massachusetts. That is where I think we should be going, and it looks like we were until the retreat, when it was mentioned that we're not going to do neighborhood focus anymore. We're going to back off and do community-wide, and it's not going to be project-oriented. It's going to be education-oriented and enforcement-oriented. We're not going to see improvements on the ground. I'm very concerned that we're backtracking and we're going back to where we put sharrows and signs up and then try to educate and enforce 24/7, 365, and waste all our money on something completely intangible that you educate 3%, 5% of the drivers out there, and what do you have? So I just wanted to point out that I'm very concerned that the money gets spent on substantive projects on the street, like bicycle boulevards and protected bicycle lanes. And in my neighborhood, in East Lawrence neighborhood, in Northwest Lawrence, but in specific defined areas where we can have a good impact. So, thank you.
Thanks, Michael. I know many of us highlighted the neighborhood traffic management program as something that we were enthused about and certainly wanted to stay involved with. And I would expect that would happen. Thanks for your comments, Michael. We do want to hear about that on a regular basis. So.
And we're going to look at everything: education, enforcement, engineering. It's the 5 E's, and so versus it's a small pot of money, the $300,000, and versus putting in a few speed humps in one neighborhood, and that's just not getting us very far. So we're gonna, I think, start looking at the whole community, but we're gonna start looking at getting some data, traffic counts, maybe areas where review yield rates, and then start developing a program. So it's going to be, it's going to evolve. This will be the first year, but we will certainly keep everyone here in the loop on that as we proceed with it.
Okay. Moving on to staff items.
So the one staff item that I have, and I just sent you guys an email right before the meeting that didn't get posted to the agenda, but Amanda gave me an update on our bicycle boulevard project here. Let me pull that up. So just to give everyone an update on where we're at, the status of the bicycle boulevard project. Alted Planning and Design has conducted a couple of open houses here in February. We had 72 people that signed in between the two meetings. Got a lot of input from citizens at those meetings. We also had a survey on the Lawrence Listens webpage where we had 239 responses from that. Also, the design teams had some meetings with stakeholders, including the school district, Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical, Lawrence Transit, Rumsey Yost Funeral Home, and Warren McElway Mortuary. We are planning on, the design team's planning on preparing the conceptual design documents for the bike boulevards on 13th and 21st Street. They're going to do 2 pop-up demonstrations. The plan is to do that in the 3rd week of March, a week after spring break. The 2 things that they're going to be demonstrating is a chicane on 21st Street, and so we are going to use this, what they call bike rail. It's the manufacturer to go out and physically create a chicane and see how it works and how the community views it and uses it. So that will be on 21st Street. And then at 13th and Connecticut, they're going to install an intersection treatment called a toucan crossing. And that allows bicyclists to go through the intersection and make turning movements, but limits vehicle traffic to right turning movements. And there's some, if you go online, you can look at different demonstrations of toucan crossing. And so that's something that they're going to install at 13th and Connecticut. And those crossings have been used in other communities. She mentioned Fort Collins, Tucson, Arizona, and Palo Alto. So that's coming up. And then following the pop-up demonstration, we will be bringing the concept design plans and any feedback from the pop-up demonstration that we received. We'll be bringing all of that to the Transportation Commission. It sounds like, just based off of the timing of getting these pop-ups installed, that it will not make the April 1st meeting. So we may shoot for having a special meeting in mid-April or waiting until May. So we'll see here as we get going here in a couple of weeks what the timeline would be for that. But I know we're trying to keep moving that forward so that we can get it constructed here this year and use those funds. So we'll be coming back to you with some more information on that project, but just wanted to give everyone an update on that. I know it's a key project everyone's interested in.
Great.
And that is all I had for staff items.
Okay. Do we do public comment after every item? Need a little help here.
We don't usually do them after staff items or commission items.
Okay.
We do them after the
Okay.
items on the regular agenda.
Okay, thank you. Commission items, anybody have anything?
Yeah, I have something. So
Okay.
I'm also on the Downtown Master Plan Steering Committee. I think that's the full name. As a representative of the Pinckney neighborhood, but I'm also interested in transit, of course. And since all of you are obviously interested in transportation, there's a survey and there's an interactive map that is on the Halcyon Levine website. They're the consultants who are taking us through the process. So if you haven't done it, you owe it to yourself. You should. It's cool. I haven't done the map, honestly, but simply because I haven't set aside the 2 or 3 hours it would probably take me to do all this stuff. I'm downtown all the time, so I have a lot to say. But, some people just put 2 comments on it. But you can do stuff like red line areas that you think are bad or good or should be redeveloped or should be preserved forever, or where you think a bike lane could go or should never be. It's pretty interesting. So I think they're up to maybe 200 comments now. And if you put the whole map together, it's chaotic. But if you break down individuals, it's very interesting. And I believe there's a survey as well. So I don't know when they're going to be rescheduling those other, the other focus group and general public meetings. Hopefully at some point. They got snowed out a couple of weeks ago, but if you can make it to one of those, it's a very interesting process. So that's my plug.
Thank you. If we don't have any other commission items, calendar?
Calendar, again, I've posted on the last page of the agenda, the future calendar. As I just mentioned, the bike boulevards may be tracking more for May. I know the bikeway plan that Jessica's been working on, we have that tentatively scheduled for May as well. And we'll be working on taking these topics on the study sessions and filling them into some months. And I may take some time and kind of redo this calendar now that we're going to be having the meetings on the same day and make this kind of flow a little better. But other than that, the next meeting would be on April the 1st.
Great. With that, we take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Great, thank you. Charlie and Donna. Good meeting. Thanks.